Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Simon. Wonderful being back with you. We're continuing in our series, Unmasking Narcissism, Pathways to Healing from the Mask of False Self and Fragile Core Beneath the Fake Self or the Facade. Those narcissists, they just full of fun, aren't they? I think when we deal with them, we kind of pull back a little bit maybe when we recognize it, or sometimes we might even draw in closer because they can be magnetic. That is, they can draw you in because of their overtness, their stimulation, their excitability, or for the ones that are more subtle, caution kind of comes up and you wonder, what's going on there? And that's what we're talking about today. That type of narcissist that's a little more subtle. We're talking about the unmasking, the covert narcissism. We used to call that covert narcissism. We used to call it passive-aggressive narcissism because it is passive aggressiveness. They don't want to show their genuine feelings, so they show modesty instead, but it's seething on the inside. Oftentimes, especially the more negative ones, they're just seething on the inside and it leaks out. So you look for the little leaks. What's coming out with their sentences? Perhaps the last words in their sentences are exposing what's really on the inside. So the unmasking covert narcissism, the false self of covert narcissism, the subtle and restrained persona, the mask, that subtle mask that's hard to tell at first. And sometimes you think, here's someone's very humble and someone who's very down to earth and very reality based, until you get to know and then you start realizing there's this boiling going on inside. Well, before we get into the details of that, let's continue to plug my book, Unmasking Addiction. It's out there. I hope you're enjoying it. I'm getting a lot of good feedback on it. It's dealing with addictions from A to Z, all the way through, kind of covering those things that you don't hear about oftentimes. So it's a good learning tool for those who are not aware of substance problems, addictive behaviors, and so on, especially if you have family members or someone who's dealing with it themselves in its early stages and they're concerned and they want to learn more so they can hold back and they can have more self-control. And then it's also a good book for treatment programs, groups in the programs, and other groups as well. The book's emphasis on community and spiritual fellowship is especially pertinent in today's environment of social fragmentation. It advocates for the development of supportive networks, which are essential in sustainable recovery. You cannot sustain a recovery if you don't have the networking when you walk out of a treatment program, or when you have stopped and 3 months go by, 6 months go by, even a year goes by. If you don't have the networking, there's a high likelihood you're either going to replace it with another addiction or you're going to relapse back into the old addiction. So please take a look at the book. Go to unmaskingaddiction.org and you can read a little bit more about it. And we'll see if it'll be helpful for you or a family member or friend. Well, getting back to the subject, the new book I've been working on, Unmasking Narcissism. I take a breath every time I look at it. Every time I draw it a little bit closer, get a little closer to what I've written, and I think, oh, I remember this person, I remember that person. There's just so many. And over the years, I've been doing this almost 4 decades now. It is multiplying. There are more narcissists out there. Now, maybe it's cultural, maybe it's just in this country. I believe it's all over the world, but certainly we're seeing it a whole lot more over here too. And I think when we see that expansion, It is a sign of the latter days. As prophecy tells us in the Bible, these certain things are going to come about in increase in the latter days. And we're seeing this type of problem, this type of behavior, of personality, fragmented or whatever you want to call it. It's damaging, it's hurtful. It's not bonding, it's not genuine, it's not true relationship. And in the latter days, Bible tells us there's going to be problems with all that. So defining covert narcissism is understanding that it is subtle. It's restrained. It's a restrained persona, a restrained mask compared to the overt narcissist who he's out there, he or she is out there, and you can tell, and I'm sure you've seen people on TV that are that way, and they're obvious, and when they're obvious, then you kind of know what's coming, and you know to take everything with a grain of salt, and it's okay, but the covert narcissist, they're more serious. They appear to be more democratic. So I guess a good word might be phlegmatic. In that reality base, there's something behind it. There's a tension coming up. And in that tension, if it is a personality disorder of narcissism, then you're going to see a kickback with whatever's going on. It's going to be hurting. It's going to be something that is a slap in the face, you might say, an indirect slap in the face, because they feel safer doing it that way than openly. In some cases, what I've recognized with those that have come in is they see themselves not as smart or as personality, excitable type personality as the covert narcissist or the grandiose narcissist. So they do it in an indirect fashion. And oftentimes I'll see couples, two narcissists, and you don't usually see two narcissists living together, married together. But what you do see is a grandiose narcissist with perhaps the passive-aggressive or covert narcissist that we're talking about today, because that one is more manipulative and it knows what the other one is looking for and needing and gives it, while this one recognizes that that's going on, but also needs the manipulation that the other one can give in getting what they want. And you got a team going on. And when that occurs, then whoa, and especially for the poor kids that grow up in that home, to be in that environment of those two narcissistic personalities, how do they develop how does the child develop his own or her own identity under that power and control of exertion and manipulation? Makes you kind of shake your head and wonder, how do you get through that? And I've had adults who've told me how they got through it, and many of them didn't get through it very well. It appears they appear introverted, the covert narcissist, modest, self-deprecating. That is, they'll say what they think you want to hear, so they'll put themselves down. They'll say words, well, I'm not this, or yeah, I wish I was more like that, or yeah. So they seem like they're humble, reality-based, but it's all a lie. It's all to get your attention, to get control, to manipulate. Beneath the mask, there's resentment, there's envy, there's a need for validation. They want to be validated. We all do. But they need it so much that they go about it the wrong way. They learned to go about it the wrong way. And there's a right way and a wrong way of doing anything. We want to learn to do these things the right way. Unlike narcissist covert, Or the passive-aggressive narcissist cloaks their hunger for affirmation in a quiet demeanor and false humility. Psychologically or mentally and emotionally, there's a struggle going on with the covert narcissist. There's an excessive self-absorption. And we're going to talk about that in a moment more so, but they've turned inward. And they're so inward driven, it stirs, it boils inside. They're hypersensitive to criticism, yet they can't express the sensitivity to it because that's not their personality. There's a fear of rejection, a fear of not looking good, a fear of perhaps punishment or problem, so they hold it in, but it just turns up the heat. That's boiling more inside. And then there's the passive-aggressive behaviors I've mentioned, slamming doors or sabotaging. Oftentimes they will sabotage things that if you're happy, they'll do something to make you unhappy. Inner shame, inadequacy, they all tell me they have this inner guilt, inner shame, this feeling that they're not good enough, they can't do enough. So oftentimes they throw that blame onto their partner. Well, she's this way, or he's this way, he's doing this, she's doing that. I can't make her happy, I can't make him happy. No matter what I do, it's this, it's that. And so what are they doing? Well, they're projecting themselves onto the other person, but they're blaming and they're saying, I'm just not good enough. So that inner shame is getting exposed a little bit there. It's coming up a little bit. The excessive self-absorption is interesting because I think we all get a little self-absorbed at times. We're thinking about how we're feeling. I get up in the morning, I think, well, how am I feeling this morning? Well, what do I need to do to feel better? Or what do I need to do to get started in the day? That's just a little bit of self-absorption. I'm thinking about me. And then we start moving and we start getting along. We start getting ready. And now we're outwardly focused on what we need to do. And we go about our day with that plan. And for me in counseling, it's the plan of what do I need to do to help? What can I do to take care of this person's problem or help this person deal with this issue or resolve this thing over here? So it's outward focused. It's no longer inward. Unfortunately, the covert narcissist remains inward. Even if, let's say, they're a counselor, they're still inward. And the focus isn't on helping, it's on feeling good or feeling better, or how can I get them back, or, well, how dare they say that, or it's constantly about them. So excessive absorption refers to a pattern in which a person becomes overly preoccupied with themselves, their thoughts, feelings, needs, desires, and problems. And as I said, we all have that at times, but they tend to be obsessed with that. They're focused, hyper-focused on it, and they often neglect others as a result of it. So when you're hyper-focused on yourself, how can you think of somebody else's needs? How can you be empathetic or understanding? You can't. It's just words to you. It's going over your head. You're not even, you may seem as though you're not even listening. And so the phlegmatic temperament, for example, and I'm just using that as an example, I'm not saying phlegmatics are that way, but the reality-based, democratic, they seem very democratic, but actually if they're covert narcissists, it's that they're not letting it sink in, what you just said. It's gone in one ear and out the other. They're really so self-absorbed. They're thinking, how does this apply to me? What can I do about this? How can I get something out of this? Or what can I do to show that I'm better? Because they don't feel better. They feel less than, and they have to put the mask on to appear better. And we'll talk some more about that in a moment. So oftentimes that self-awareness prevents them from helping you or dealing with others. The realities are about them, not about you. Instead, it crosses a line where the individual's focus turns inward in a way that distorts relationships, impairs empathy, and hinders personal spiritual growth. How can you grow spiritually if you're so self-absorbed? Doesn't work that way. Christianity doesn't work that way. Some other religions may work that way, but not Christianity. Christianity is love. It's outward focused. It's what can I do for you? It's giving. It's serving. It's pleasing God. It's doing right things. It's not about everything being done for me. And the covert narcissist is just like a sponge, can't get enough. It needs more and more. And that hinders spiritual growth. Their false self protects fragile self-esteem, but breeds envy, resentment, and subtle hostility. In the old days, the DSM-3, earlier diagnostic manual, it had passive aggressiveness as a personality disorder in its own category. And there was research at the time that they could be very dangerous. The hostility could be so great that they were known to be murderers or batterers or whatever. After that, they took that off of the DSM, yet it is that way. A covert narcissist can be dangerous. And so you have to be careful. You have to be honest with them, be genuine with them, but also watch your back, because that's where they attack you, from the back. The passive aggressive, covert, however you want to look at that, they're going to get you as you're walking out the door. They're going to get you when you don't realize it. They're going to gossip about you. They're going to try to turn others away from you. It's all through manipulation, not through direct confrontation like the overt narcissists, the grandiose narcissists and other narcissists, more direct confrontation. The covert, it's inward, it's indirect, and you don't see it, you don't know it, you may not even be aware of it. I had one call me once and apologized for something he did. I didn't ask him what he did, and I knew he was a covert narcissist. I just accepted the apology and forgave him, and see you later. I didn't want to know, because I could imagine, that's what they do. And they'll apologize, but they'll apologize because they're trying to get something from you. They're trying to re-engage in some way. They're trying to get themselves to feel better, because there is a guilt that comes up with covert narcissism. There is shame inside. So to feel better, they may repent, be sorrowful for a short time, but it slips right back if they're not genuinely geared for change. You remember the Pharisees in the Bible, that false humility? Luke 18 talks about that. Pharisees thanks God for being like others. Thank you for making me the way you made me and all this, and not like that person over there. Well, they appear humble, but they reveal their pride in what they're doing, in their behavior. And it is hard to know. It is hard to recognize sometimes, because you think it's genuine at first until you start to see the pattern. So you always look for patterns. They seek validation through comparing themselves with others, or comparing what they do with what others are doing, what they've done with what's been done by others. They're constantly comparing, and you see that in politics a lot when you're watching the news or stuff on TV, and they're constantly putting the other one down and lifting themselves up. And even if they've got nothing to lift up, they're still going to find something to put the other one down to demonstrate they're better. Well, that is manipulation, and that's seeking validation through comparison. Covert narcissists weaponize humility to draw admiration while hiding spiritual pride through social comparison. And when you do that, you recognize there's two types. There's the upward comparison, and there's the downward comparison. Now, I remember when I used to play tennis when I was younger, I never wanted to play with someone who was less than my abilities. I wanted to play with someone who was better than my abilities so I could move up and improve. So I would lose, but I would be happy to lose because I'm losing to someone who's better, and I'm learning from how they're playing, and I'm becoming better myself. And sometimes you'd have an equal player that you're playing with, and that was good too, and that was stimulating, but still you wanted that one that was just a little better because it would drive you to be better. The covert narcissists, they're not looking at it that way. In that upward comparison, they're looking at someone better and they're feeling inferior. They're not looking at someone better thinking it's going to help them move up to be better themselves. They just see themselves as less than, unable to achieve, unable to reach that better. And that causes the heat to turn up inside, that causes the boiling to occur inside. And then there's the downward comparison, looking at someone worse off and feeling better about it. The problem is that both are unstable. Neither builds a secure identity when they're looking at that from that perspective of the covert narcissism, the passive aggressiveness. Upward comparison breeds envy. It breeds shame. It breeds discouragement. Downward comparison, it fuels pride and false security. Neither one works for them. Validation through comparison distorts self-worth into a fragile equation of self-esteem equals how I measure up, how I measure up today compared to someone else or something else. The problem is that's an equation that tears you down. It's not constructive, it's destructive. And we don't want those kinds of comparisons. And we want to deal with, okay, how can I get better? How can I improve? Not to think that I can never get that, so I'm going to be angry and upset about it, but I'm going to compare myself to others who are less than. I'm going to see everybody else as less than. Now, where does that come from? That comes from childhood. That comes from parents who are critical, maybe unloving, uncaring, parents who perhaps narcissistic themselves, putting down constantly. The child feels they can never be good enough, they can never do well, they can never achieve. Passive aggressiveness sets in if they're perhaps more melancholy in temperament, more sensitive in temperament. And so they hold it in and it stirs, it boils, and then they have to compare to feel better. And they look for ways of comparing when they go to school or when they're at play in order to feel better about themselves. Inner pride and envy wells up. The Pharisees, again, a good example, focused on superiority over others. They displayed covert envy. Yeah. Well, he's got more money than I do, or they have this, I don't. Well, I've got to do something about it so I can feel better. What wretched people they are. Let's make a rule. Let's make a rule that they can't have this much money anymore. Let's make a rule they have to pay more taxes. Let's make a rule they can't dress that way anymore. Now I feel better. They're breaking the rules. They're not good enough. Or now I'm keeping them down so I don't feel bad anymore. That's covert narcissism. Proverbs 21 tells us a person may think their own ways are right, but the Lord, He looks at the heart. He weighs the heart. Covert narcissist masks inadequacy with subtle superiority and veiled disdain. That's how they see you, with disdain. But they're not going to tell you that. They're going to present themselves mirroring back to you what they think you want to see or what you want to hear. Passive-aggressive superiority is prevalent in their behavior. Pharisees cloaked themselves with judgment and prayer. They used gratitude to mask superiority, and they mirrored covert narcissism manipulation. Being thankful, being grateful, because you want to hear that, so they're going to act that way. Even prayer can become a stage for comparison when humility is absent. Gratitude as a mask, well, it masks superiority. It masks what they don't want you to see. On the surface, gratitude appears humble. You want someone to be grateful, don't you? When you give something or you do something, you want them to say thank you. You want them to show some appreciation for it. Someone might say, I'm so thankful for this opportunity. Or, I really appreciate what you did. Feels good. You're getting reinforced, motivated to do more for them or for someone else. But if it's coming out of a covert narcissist, it's disingenuous, because genuine gratitude acknowledges the giver and levels the relational field. But the covert narcissist manipulates. Gratitude may serve as a false humility, that mask of false humility. The tone or subtext of the thank you subtly elevates the self rather than the other. Basically, they're saying thank you in some way to elevate themselves. I'm grateful that God made me strong enough to endure all these trials when most people couldn't. I appreciate you helping me, though I usually don't need help. They got that little twist at the end there, letting you know, there's something there that really hurts for them to say thank you. They've got to elevate themselves somehow in that thank you. This type of gratitude is laced with superiority. It positions the narcissistic individual as exceptional, chosen, or more resilient. Instead of fostering connection, because when you genuinely say thank you and you appreciate and so on, you're fostering connection in many ways. But they're not fostering connection. Instead of fostering connection, it creates distance. Gratitude used not to honor, but to assert subtle dominance. This is compared to the Pharisees in Luke chapter 18 who prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people. His gratitude masked contempt. And then the mirroring that comes about out of all that is mirroring. It's a mental, emotional act of reflecting that other person's emotions. So as I said earlier, what do they want to hear? What do they want to see? So I'm going to reflect it. I'm going to mirror back so they can get what they think they're getting, but I really don't mean it. And the behavior kind of demonstrates they don't mean it after a little bit. A child mirrors to a parent to bond. A spouse mirrors joy to validate the other. Covert narcissists, however, they weaponize mirroring. They study what you're looking for, what you need, your smile, your frown. They're studying that, and they're giving back what they think you're looking for or what they think you need. They study your values, and then they reflect back those values to win trust and admiration or to gain control. If you prize kindness, they mirror exaggerated kindness. A key word there is exaggerated. If you see someone is going a little overboard with the gratitude or in other ways, right away, okay, wait a minute, there's just, maybe it could be a little red flag. Just be cautious now. Just pay attention. It's exaggerated. So what's going on behind that mask of exaggeration? And all of us tend to exaggerate a little here and there, but they're doing it regular. With them, it's a profession. They're good at it. If you cherish deep faith, they mirror fervent spirituality. Oh, they're raising their hands, or they're praising God with every sentence, or whatever it might be. Again, genuine people might be doing that. Genuine love for God, genuinely spiritual, perhaps more extroverted and all that. But then the passive, the covert narcissists, they're doing it for other reasons. If you value humility, they mirror self-effacing speech. In other words, they'll put themselves down. They don't mean it though, but they know you want to hear that. You appreciate that. It draws you in, but the reflection's hollow. The goal's not a connection. It's assimilation for manipulation. Once the bond is secured, the mask can drop very quickly, revealing entitlement or disdain. Paul warned us about this in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 when he said, Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It's not surprising then if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness. In other words, mirroring in this sense is a form of masquerading. Biblically, in Matthew chapter 23, it says about the Pharisees, they're whitewashed tombs. They look good on the outside. On the inside, not so good. Outwardly righteous, inwardly corrupt. Covert narcissists mirror this duplicity. Hidden pride damages relationships and stunts spiritual growth. They're masters of manipulation. They use guilt, shame. I think another good word is diversion. They distract you. They point the finger, and in doing so, it takes the focus off of them onto someone else or something else. And then they become the victim through that distraction and blaming, constant blaming. That person's wrong. That program is wrong. That church is wrong. That pastor is wrong. That politician is wrong. It's constantly, instead of saying, look at what I've done, look at my accomplishments, look at the productivity and so on and so forth, and here's how we can do better and so on and so forth. No, they're constantly pointing the finger. Right away, when you see someone finger pointing, there's, okay, something's wrong there. Let's turn it back. And what have you done lately? What's your plan? How can you improve things? What do you have in mind to make things better? They can't see that because of that narcissism, that self-absorption, that anger and seething. They then spill it over. They've got to look outward. They've got to point the finger. When people are doing that, the Bible tells us not to do that, doesn't it? It says, no, don't, love others, find good in others, speak well of others, do well. Okay, what have I done lately that's doing well? And sometimes you can trip up a covert narcissist by just bringing it back to them. Well, what have you done about that in getting along, in helping to get along, in improving the situation? Their eyes will get big because they weren't expecting that. And you can tell they're baffled at the moment because they don't think that way. They're constantly outward blaming thinking. And you'll see the staggering, and then they'll come up with something, and then it just turns right back outward again. Covert narcissists manipulate, indirectly avoiding confrontation while exploiting others. There is a path for healing, though. It's not a hopeless situation. All narcissism, even those way over here, even the Jezebel spirit, there's a little bit of hope over there. But they have to want to change. They have to hit that rock bottom. And in some cases, God has to come down with some kind of God experience for them to make those changes. Paul was a good example of that. He had a God experience with Jesus, and he made those changes. He was able to make those changes. So it is possible. As I've said before, mild to moderate, they're more likely of improvements can be made there with covert narcissism and other narcissists. Once it crosses over, then okay, it's going to take more work and is less likely, but there's a path to healing for all of it. Healing begins with recognizing wounds, identifying the childhood neglect, the criticism, bringing them back to their past. Where did this come from? Very few are born that way. The majority have experienced in some way those experiences of criticism, neglect, trauma, hurt, abandonment, rejection, confusion, chaos, conflict, and they learned to cope with it with narcissistic behaviors. Learning to be vulnerable and humble is essential. So first, identifying where is this coming from, and they have to hit a bottom usually to start looking at the reality, the truth. And when they do, then they can start looking at some of that stuff. And as they identify it, getting healing for some of it through that one-to-one relationship with God, through those inner experiences of what is Jesus saying to them in those memories? What does he want them to know? The insights that are given can be very eye-opening and healing as well. My grace is sufficient to you, the Bible says. In other words, my unmerited favor is all you need, but you have to make the changes. So they have to be willing and they have to work on it, And if they do, that inner change comes about because nobody can make them change. No matter how much you might love someone, if you're a partner with someone like that, you can't make them change. You can't fix them. But if they really want to be fixed, if they really want to change, if they really recognize there's something here and I don't like it and I want to improve, they will make those changes. All you have to do is set the example, be the model. So they have to develop empathy and gratitude. That's what they lack. And it's hard to develop empathy if you've hardened your heart. Yet, even for those with the most hardened hearts, there's a little space, just a little softness there. How do we make that softness grow? How do we expand that softness? And that's where the work comes in to the picture. Covert narcissists must dismantle the false self, embracing Christ's grace. When I say embracing Christ's grace, they can't do it by their own might. They can't do it by your help or someone else's help. They need a little extra something to help them. And that's where God comes into the picture. That's where the Holy Spirit comes into the picture, enhancing us just enough to do a little more than we're capable of doing. Well, what's the key takeaway to all this? Covert narcissism thrives in secrecy and false humility. Healing comes through confession. They got to admit there's a problem. It's no different than an alcoholic, a drug addict. Step one, you got to recognize there's a problem. You got to admit it. I've made a mess of my life and this and that. And okay, so I can't do it myself. I need help, and I need to turn to God for that help. I need to let go of my ego and thrive by generating God's power, God's gift into me so He can help me along. All those who exalt themselves will be humbled, the Bible tells us, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Transformation begins when the covert narcissist steps into the light of truth. What happens when you step into that light of truth? Well, it replaces performance. I don't have to perform. I can just accept now. I can just be me. A lot of times when I do a temperament profile on someone, the digitized National Christian Counselors Association profile, which is much more accurate, and they look at that and they say, oh, it's okay to be me. I don't have to be like my sister, my brother, my dad, my mom, or anybody else. I can just be me. This is who I was made to be. It's a relief. It's a load lifter off the shoulders. And that's a good start to go in the right direction. Replacing performance with grace. God's unmerited favor. Giving unmerited favor to others. That's grace. And that's empathy. Helps you to develop that empathy when you defer constantly, when you recognize the needs of others instead of just thinking about your own needs. Well, I hope this was helpful for you in some way. And perhaps you know somebody, I'm sure you know somebody with these issues. Next time, we're going to get into the fifth narcissistic type. This one's not so bad. Communal narcissism, unmasking communal narcissism. I think I'd rather be around a communal narcissist than any of the others. We'll see what you think when we talk about it next time. May your troubles be minor, blessings more, and happiness come through your door. Would you give us a thumbs up? We would appreciate it. Bye.